Welcome back to Echelon Orchid. And on today, my special guest is Dr. Cynthia Sutherland. She is not only an amazing cybersecurity person, we went to the same school to getting our Doctors of Science in Cybersecurity, and she's an author. And so on today, we're going to be talking a little bit about all of those things. So, Dr. Sutherland, thank you so much for joining. How are you this fine day?
I'm good. I'm good. How about yourself?
I am amazing. And every day that I can't say I'm amazing, I try to check that. Hopefully, I have very few days of those moments. So, we went through the same school. I think you finished in what, 2016?
18.
18. Okay, 18. Okay. I couldn't remember exactly when the dates were, because the last time I was there, Dr. Barker was still there, so I wasn't sure if she was still there when you finished or not. Okay, so it was right around that.
Was, yeah.
So perfect. So how did you wind up coming across Capital?
Well, it was actually back in 2005. I was doing vulnerability management for the Army Research Lab. And a friend of mine said, you should really thinking about getting into information assurance. And I was like, information assurance? It was like, yeah, you could go take this test and, you're really good at this. I think you should really try to go out for a CompTIA Security Plus. I said, Security Plus. Okay. All right. I'll look into it. And so I looked into it. I was like, okay, information assurance. And I'm looking and I'm like, if this is the entry level, what's the end level? What's the golden ticket that I need in this industry to be able to do what I want to do? So I looked for the golden ticket, and at that time it was the CISSP. And so I think it was probably about 20,000 CISSPs worldwide or something like that back in '05. And I said, okay, I looked through the CISSP and I was like, okay, I'm weak in crypto. I need to know more about fire extinguishers and all this other stuff. So where can I get this information? So I said, well, I started doing my research and I found Capital College had their master's in network security program mirrored from the CISSP. And so I said, oh, awesome. I can go get my master's and then be done and graduate and get my cert. And that's what I did. I went to Capital College before they were Capital University and got my master's in network security and then got my CISSP like 2 months later. And that's how I was introduced to Capital. And so when I was ready to go back and get my doctorate, I looked at Mason. I actually tried Mason for a little bit. But Mason was having some problems at the time trying to get their doctoral program up and running. And so I just transferred my credits from Mason to Capital and to Capital's doctoral program and went there and finished up there. So it was, I got my master's and my doctorate there.
That's awesome. So did you feel better off or worse off after having to learn the Bell LaPadula security model? And I think the CISSP is the only one of those ones that actually ask about that model.
Wow, it's been a minute since I heard that. I felt worse off because it was like, okay, this is something I know I'm not gonna need. But the concept is nice.
Yeah, it was always one of those things where I was like, really? This? I'm like, and then I remember one of my buddies that we worked together when we were standing up Homeland. We were on the contractor side as a big managed service contract, FEMA being a part of that managed service there in the beginning with Unisys doing all that. I don't know if they were still there doing all the managed services at that time. But he was studying for his CISSP, and I was like, hey, just tell me the difference between SSL version 3 and TLS 1.0. He's like, well, they don't talk about it in this book. And I'm like, well, I think it's because of that. This would have been like, he took a CISSP like in, maybe it was either '03 or '04 at the time. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to focus on the CISSP. I'm going to keep focus on, at that time I was doing technical certs, but yeah. But now I don't even know if they do it now, because it's been so long since I've done any certification.
I know, right?
I'm like, I have a bad habit. Actually, I don't think it's a bad habit. So like all of my certifications are expired mainly because I'm like I just don't want to fill out the paperwork for all that continuing education stuff.
You have to do so much, but I mean, what you're doing now is continuous education stuff.
I think so, but I just don't want to fill out the paperwork, so all expired. Now, so yeah, so you had a you were military,
Hmm.
all right, and were you? I don't remember. It was Army?
Yep.
Okay, so you went through the Army, and a lot of the stuff. The only thing I'll tell you this: the only thing I remember about you, other than sometimes coming to the fishbowl, was that every time I saw you, you had this big, huge smile on your face all the time. And and now after reading your book, I'm kind of going, in a way, you were having to put on you were still putting on a uniform. You were putting on a mask at that
Well,
time.
at that time, actually, I wasn't. When I was going through that program, I literally had been through my journey. It was before I actually finished my journey before I got my doctorate.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, yeah, I actually finished the journey because it was between 2013 to 2015 where things just kind of like everything came to a head. I went through my framework, um, uh, and came out on the other end so much stronger. And it was in 2015, towards the end of 2015, when everything was done. And then matter of fact, that October of 2015 is when I applied to go to Capitol and started in January of 2016.
Well, now I feel a little bit better because at least about because I'm not having had a lot of in-depth conversations with you and reading your book, which is letters to my brown girls and four phases to liberated life beyond childhood sexual abuse. And I was like, wow, not knowing you, but always seeing this. Now I feel a little bit better because then it was you were already in that thriving mode. You'd already kind of figured it out. So
Yes.
even better.
Yes, and I'll tell you that journey of my through the doctoral process was awesome for me. I absolutely love residency because, at the time when I was going through my doctorate, I was the CISO for the Joint Chief of Staff, as well as a U.S. rep for a multinational security accreditation board, where I was leading 23 countries in NATO and trying to build out this international framework, right? And I'm doing all this stuff for my job. But it's like the only time I felt like I could be a real student is when I was on campus. Like it just, for me, being on campus around my fellow students, around my professors, it just felt so good. And in my book, Letters to My Brown Girls, one of the first things I realize is that education has always been my safe space. Schools have always been my safe space. And so it's like when I'm in a school, I feel like at my best, the best person I could be because I'm around people that think like me. I'm around people that, act like me. And it just feels good to be around those people. And I just felt like I was in my element when I was at residency. So
Well,
yeah,
there was a short time period though that wasn't true, which we'll get to later.
okay.
I read that in your book.
Yes.
But this is one of the things I love the questions when you first start off with the book. There's four questions: why heal? Why heal now? Who am I? And who am I after I healed? And one of the things that I really like about this is that last question, because I like to tell people, imagine where you're going to be, wherever that is, 5 years, 10 years from now, and then how would you advise your present self on how to get there? And so I like that aspect of who am I after I healed? Now, what advice would you give yourself on how to heal?
So when I started writing the book, it was really trying to put everything on paper because it was so much that I wanted to offer people. And so for me to think about, okay, if I'm in the reader's shoes, what would be some of the questions that I would ask, or if I was face to face with them, what would be some of the questions I would ask them? And then I started thinking there were a lot of questions that came to me when I was on my healing journey. And those questions were, why, and when the questions were asked to me, they weren't asked. in a polite tone. They were not asked in a polite tone. They were asked, why are you doing this now? Why are you bringing up all this old stuff? You know, this isn't going to hurt anybody. What do you hope to achieve from this? And it was, to me, when those individuals asked me those questions, I realized that they were still dealing with a lot of hurt in their lives. And so I'm like, okay, well, let me make sure I could help the reader understand, what are some of the questions they're going to get and how can they respond. And so for me, um, why now? Well, for me, the why now was after I had finished going through my journey. I was, and even while I was on my journey, I was still doing public speaking engagements for STEM students, middle school, high school kids, where guidance counselors and individuals would ask me to come talk to the children about STEM and cybersecurity. And so in my journey, especially in my speeches, one that I have called Destiny versus Determination versus Destiny, I speak to them about how, regardless of what you're going through as far as school is concerned, life still happens. And there are a lot of bad things that can happen in your life, and you can overcome them. And so I talked to them about how, I was kept back in the first grade because they said I couldn't read. I talked to them about being sexually abused, being a teenage mom, all these different things, and in a way to kind of help them see that you can overcome many challenges. A lot of things are going to happen and you can overcome them, but life still goes on. And so after that, people were saying, oh, how did you do this? How did you heal? And I was talking to a lot of people, but I couldn't be in every place all the time. And so that's what really prompted me to write the book, is that I needed my message to be in places where I couldn't be, so that others could get that feeling, could get those stories to help them heal. And so that's how I came out with, here's what I'm doing with the book. Here's why I'm writing the book now, and not why, more or less not focused on why I'm healing, but why I wrote the book now. And that's why I wrote the book, is to help others heal, because I couldn't be there in so many places because so many people started coming to me asking me, hey, what about this? Can you advise me on this? I had one woman come up to me during a women's retreat at church, where she asked me to help her tell her husband she was sexually abused as a child because she hadn't told her husband. There was a woman that came up and asked, spoke about how my story gave her courage to leave her husband who was raping her at the time. And then I had one of my employees who came to me and told me about how he had just found out that his dad had been raping his younger sister for many years. And so those conversations were all hard conversations to have with these individuals, because I know that they needed the resources, but I also knew that there were more stories out there and I couldn't be there. So that's why I wrote the book.
I think those are all great reasons, and then it's going to lead to this next question. You document quite a bit, because I don't want to give everything about your book. So hopefully the listeners will go and buy the book and get all the details. But you struggled quite a bit to get to where you are today.
Mm-hmm.
Was the struggle worth it?
Oh, yes. Prime example. I remember one day, I was walking from my car at the Pentagon on my way into the office, and I saw how beautiful the sky was. It was a beautiful orange, and it was just so pretty. And I'm looking up, and it was like, I love nature. I appreciate a lot of small things. And one of the things that I've learned through this journey is to appreciate the simple things in life, because so much can happen. But there are some things in this world that are so beautiful, and they're simplistically beautiful. And just to be able to appreciate the small things, small wins, small achievements, I mean, it's, for me, it makes life so much more worth living. And so I've learned to appreciate the small stuff, the big things that I can't control. If I can't control it, then there's nothing else I can do. And it's kind of frustrating to my husband, because he's like, "Why aren't you upset?" I'm like, "For what? If you can't control it, you can't control it." So the only thing that you can control is your response, your reactions to what happens to you in life. And so for me, going through that journey taught me how to, one, gave me resources and tools to deal with challenges in life. And so I used a lot of those challenges, whether it was, on my journey from the sexual abuse to even dealing with, you know, employees at work and their attitudes, or situations out in public with people who don't know how to, that have issues in public, with whether it's racism, whether it's sexism, the LGBTQ community. It's like when you have those resources and tools to kind of help you cope with different stresses in life, it makes things a whole lot easier to deal with.
Yeah, I could definitely see that, and I'm glad you answered it that way, because I was going to, argue with you and be like, if these things didn't happen, your message wouldn't be out there, and think about all the people you wouldn't be helping right now.
True, true. And some I had this is a difficult one of the difficult questions I got was, um they asked, do you think that um it happened for a reason? And I'm like, everything happens. Do I believe in a divine path? I do believe in a divine path, but I also know bad things happen in this world. And so, yes, my faith was tested. And I have seen a lot of challenges that come on that even to this day still test my faith. But I really believe that things do happen for a reason. Not all things, but things do happen for a reason. And it's been an awesome feeling to know that I've been able to help other people in their journey and trying to handle this. Whether it's, women who've actually been sexually abused, men who've been sexually abused, as well as men who are married to women that have been sexually abused. Because I will tell you, it takes a special kind of man to be married to a woman who's been sexually assaulted in her life, and to be able for him to have that patience and understanding and be there to be her support system. I've seen a lot of great men step up and take on that role. So it's this book has been seen in many lights. So I can really appreciate, the tool, the book as a mechanism itself, and how it's been able to help others in different ways that I didn't even think about.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I mean, I can appreciate my faith being tested and your faith being tested, because that's kind of, the job of, the father of lies, right? So, they're going to do those things, and it's going to cause a lot of that self-doubt on you. So I'm going to go back, because you had said, hey, school's always been your kind of release, but I think, was it middle school or junior high where you decided, well, you weren't going to be this nerd anymore, and you were going to play around in the hallways, and you thought you were smarter than a particular individual.
Yes, my principal. Yes. So my middle school year, prior to middle school, going through the abuse, plus just being bullied. Because I used to wear glasses, really thick glasses, really big thick glasses. I got picked on all the time for being the nerd in the projects, and it was, I got picked on from that. I got picked on for being light skinned black, because colorism is very strong in the African American community as well, where you back in those days, dark skinned blacks didn't like light skinned blacks. So I got bullied by a lot of dark skinned blacks. So I was just tired of just being me. And I felt that school, starting middle school, was a way for me to just change. I didn't want to be a nerd anymore. I didn't want to be smart. I didn't want anybody to know I was smart. So it was just an opportunity for me to just create a new person. Well, um, going through middle school, doing, just because my mom, she wasn't paying attention at the time, and me and my dad, we I didn't really have a relationship with him, so school was what I had. And so my principal just so happened, was noticed me in the hallways. And so when she called me out, for being in the hallways too much, I thought that she was just playing. But she was like, oh, I bet not catch you again. And so I thought that, okay, well, she's not gonna remember what she said. It's all these kids in this school. She's not gonna remember me, but she did. And she called me out and embarrassed me in front of all my friends. And when I tell you, even till this day, she's still that same person. I saw her last month. Actually, I talked to her last week, and she's still the strong educator, motivator in our school system back home in South Carolina, pushing other women. I'm sorry, other young girls and women, to overcome their issues, their challenges in life. And so for her to take me under her wings, I'll say under her wings in middle school, she introduced me to college. She took me to a lot of historically Black college, university activities, introduced me to sororities and fraternities. It was a lot of different things that she introduced me to. And having that relationship with her going forward has been very helpful in keeping me straight throughout the rest of my um, um, high school years and middle school years.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you still kept in touch
Oh
with
yes,
with Dr. McFadden, because
yeah.
it's you didn't go into a lot of details, but I could feel at least the emotional connection that if this person hadn't taken that interest in you, then you might not be right here today.
You are so correct. You are so correct. And the thing is that, she was old school back in those days. I don't see teachers, principals, that take so much passion and willing to risk so much to make sure their students had what they, got received the best. And so for her, she's now teaching at not teaching, but she's a principal at an alternative school back home. So she's there, and she calls me and has me come. Even when I'm in town, she'll ask me to come speak to them about, the challenges in life. And so I do that. She called me last week asking me about automotive cybersecurity. So I educated them on that. So, but yeah, anytime she needs me, she knows I'm there for her. Her as well as Miss Cleveland, Miss Littlejohn, those were all those guidance counselors in middle school. And then when I got to high school, same situation. I created relationships. I intentionally created relationships with my high school principals because I knew the benefit that it gave me from middle school.
That's great, and it's always extremely impactful when other people take notice about what's going on, because they'll help you to steer that ship. And it is a shame because I kind of seen today, it feels like many teachers and educators in the school system aren't willing to put themselves out there like that anymore. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what it feels like. At least in general, I feel like when I was growing up, they did, and now they don't.
Well, I think that there's been a lot of other bureaucratic red tape that's been put in place.
Mm.
There's also been, in my opinion, lack of ownership and responsibility in, children's behavior on their parents. And so when you look at, I know parents that intentionally they look at school as just a daycare for their kids, right? And a lot of that was shown during COVID, where a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of parents really realized, like, okay, this my child is struggling, or I can't believe that they're at this level at home, or when they got home the kids didn't have a parent to check on them or anything like that. So I see the relationship, and I mean the performance and attitude, not just from the teachers but from the parents, on the parent side. And so for me, I personally believe that education starts at home. And so I educate my kids so when they get to school, it's more or less an add-on to what they've learned at home. And so, but a lot of parents just they can't afford that or don't have time to do that. But it just goes back to personal responsibility and figuring out what works best for you and the kid, but then also understanding that children are little humans. They have their issues, their emotions too. So when they take that to school, you have to be able to trust what's going on with the teacher. So it's just it goes both ways from a parent and a teacher perspective.
I absolutely agree. I've always, and it gets me in a little bit of trouble. I'm like, look, the school is there to provide a framework. That's it, and the parent has got to be involved in what in guiding their. I mean, we're supposed to be the ultimate mentors, to our children. And I
The
see,
first role model.
right, and I unfortunately don't see that either. And I can't tell you how many times I heard, well, I should be getting all of that tax dollars back because I'm paying for those teachers and I'm the ones teaching them here at home with COVID. And I'm like, well, do you think you could really do that? Like, you're not really paying attention. The damage that's been done due to COVID, I think, is we won't feel the true effects of this for, I think, many years.
Doing global cybersecurity, I've spoken to a lot of country representatives, France, Germany, UK, Australia, and everybody struggles with finding quality cybersecurity professionals. When you look at the dynamics that it takes to become a quality cybersecurity professional and the type of education, the competition is going to be in the future. The jobs are going to be there. Whether the children are educated enough to do it is a different story. And so, I got an article today where they talked about China's putting in this new law for limiting gaming hours for their students. And when you look at gaming, it's like it's a billion-dollar industry, but in the same token, there has to be some restrictions because children do still need to do other things besides gaming. And so between gaming, tablets, unrestricted access to all of these things, I just think that our children are going to struggle in the future if they don't have dedicated efforts to kind of help them get back on track from what was lost due to COVID. One thing
Absolutely.
I can say from my daughter's school, they didn't miss a beat. They stayed in school. They stayed in school from the perspective of having virtual school from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Monday through Friday. And so we were blessed to be able to do that. But in the same token, I do know some kids who the entire time they were at home alone where their parents couldn't afford a private school, or their parents couldn't afford to be home with them while they're in school. So it's going to be some challenges trying to get our kids back up to speed to kind of recover what was lost. But I think it's just going to take a dedicated effort and awareness of parents to kind of get them there.
It will. I think, I mean, I see a lot of the challenges. Like one of the ones that, especially divorce, is playing an even more critical role because then you've got it to where the the parents don't agree on the remote schooling aspects, and not all of them are involved in the same way. And so when you have the children going back and forth from households, and one household is like very strict about how you're going to get your things done, and the other one is not, well, then the problems are amplified because it's not just you missed a little bit of homework, you missed a whole week of school.
Cool. Yes, yes. When you're looking at the, like you said, separate parents, or just no, or a single parent. I know for me, my mom was a single parent raising us, but then she got remarried, and my stepdad's focus primary was I'm a provider. I'm going to work. That's my job, and that's what he did. Him and my mom, they were providers, but the biggest goal for them was, hey, I just want you to graduate high school. That's it. That's my goal for you. And so my mom, who she was a sixth grade dropout, because she was also sexually abused as a child, so she ran away from home And so she, really didn't understand or get an opportunity to go through and understand the value of education. But she did instill it in me to make sure that I did get at least a high school diploma. So for me, the loftiest goal I could ever have in my family was getting a high school diploma. And so to be able to get that and then get to where I am now has been a pride and joy moment for my mom, because it was something that she just really never thought about back then. And for me, I was an independent learner, especially after staying being held back in the first grade. So that second time in the first grade is when I really found my passion to read. And but still my mom never checked my homework. It was just me just having teachers as I got older, teachers making sure I did it. But from a home perspective, she didn't check it. So it was like, okay, if you're not getting it at home, then get it at school. And that goes back to that conversation of parents and teachers, right? And so having that balance back then was easy because we didn't have half the stuff that we have to deal with now. Remember back then, I think we had what, about 12 TV channels. We didn't have internet. Like it was you were more intrigued to go to a book or go outside and play, but we didn't have video games and all the other things that kids have now. So now it takes a real dedicated effort to make kids go pop open a book.
It is. So I'm curious, did your passion for reading back there in the first grade at that second time, do you think that helped you to compartmentalize the abuse that was going on? Was that your escape?
It was my escape. It was that and my favorite books were like, I mean, like Judy Blume, Bernstein Bears. Like I loved all of those books. And then the fact that Pizza Hut had the Book It competition, and I was just reading books just so I could get that free coupon for my own personal pan pizza that I didn't have to share with anybody. And so, but reading it was a huge escape, and I still love reading to kind of just get away. Um, it was it Man, I love books. I'm struggling right now to throw away books, because I really need to clean my library out. But yeah, I love books, and it was for me my escape.
I can see that. Now I basically only buy digital books unless I really like the book. Then I'll buy it so I can put it on my bookshelf to remind myself of it. Um, that because then I have it, but I like the digital aspect because especially like with like think about we were lucky in the way in which we could research today for doing our
Yeah.
dissertation because now I got all those digital books. I can look for the exact phrase, get it, bam, go, because I knew I already read it, and so I had all these digital books. So I've got some that are there. Uh, it's so, but I probably on average I probably read 2 books a week.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm so busy. I'm still busy trying to get up to speed on different industry laws.
Oh yeah.
But I will tell you, my favorite book is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And it is like, I've read that book 4 times. And every time I read it, I get something new from it. But that's one of my favorite books.
That's great. All right, so I won't go into a whole lot more of your book just because I want people to buy it, but there's a couple of things I do want to touch on. Because the first thing that came to mind was when I just saw RAP framework, I'm like, oh, remote access Trojan.
I understand. I understand why you would say that.
But I hadn't heard of that framework before. Is that something you came across in doing your research for the book? Is it something you found as you were trying to heal?
So it was something that I found when I was doing research for the dissertation, but because it was something that after a while, like when trying to, so going through everything that I went through, and when I saw this, because my original dissertation was going to be on a criminal law. I forgot what the original dissertation was, but then I redid it. But when I saw this, I'm like, this is applicable to cybercrime, but then it's applicable to any crime, any crime. And to see and to realize that it was something that they came up with back in World War II, like, wow, this is amazing. And so I've used this on, when speaking against, um, I've had people talk about, oh, well, how can we hope, be upset about the police killing Black people when we're killing our own Black people, and why are we having such high crime rates and blah, blah, blah. I've actually used the routine activities theory to help them understand ways that we can help reduce crime in different areas. And so looking back at the motivation of the criminal, looking at the motivation of a cyber criminal versus a pedophile. And, and one of the prime examples I've given is that, you can put a child in front of a bank robber, and they're not motivated to sexually assault a child, because that's not their motivation. Their motivation is the money in the bank. But if you put a child in front of a pedophile, that's their motivation. And so when you start looking at ways to reduce um, child abuse, cybercrime, or bank robbers, or whatever, look at the motivation to kind of understand what's the motivation of that criminal, and what were the vulnerabilities of that target, and who was guarding that, and what was supposed to be the capable guardian to protect that specific target. That theory for me, it helped me break down so much and understand logic that I could help others understand.
That's great. So then you talk a little bit about the after framework, and so in that acknowledge phase, I think, and I'd like your reaction to this, because this is the first phase, and I think probably most people and most things always tend to fail in the first phase of anything. That doesn't matter no matter what training, whether it be college, they tend to drop out in that first year. So they're saying that first phase, and I think to me, the reason why this would be the hardest is because the hardest thing that we have to do as humans, and I think we're the only animal that is capable of this, which is being honest with ourselves. We do a really good job of lying to ourselves.
Yes, yes. And that for me, that phase is the hardest, is one of the hardest parts, because it gets you to a point where you have to understand that you have issues. And a lot of people don't want to do self-reflection. A lot of people want to play victim. Some people who, and I'm not talking about just sexual assault, I'm talking about just, different crimes, in general. You have to acknowledge that, yes, you were a victim, but you don't have to take that on. You were victimized, but you don't have to take that on as something that, that this is you now. No, this is not you. There are things that you can do to, help you overcome, specifically from a sexual assault perspective. One, acknowledging, yes, it happened. It happened, but you are still breathing. You're still living. You're still here to take on and go to the next step of being a survivor. And so once you come from being that victim to then being that survivor, and, understanding that you did something that others didn't get an opportunity, because some people didn't breathe after that. Some people lost their life because of that. And so take stock, and acknowledge that this is a major thing for you to come out alive. And now it's time for you to heal. And so a lot of people, when they come from being a victim to becoming a survivor, specifically back in those days, a lot of the resources weren't available, or they weren't aware that whatever resources were available at that time. Um, so it's kind of like, okay, now here you are, you're a survivor. You've created a lot of unhealthy habits, survival tactics to help you maintain. I had one woman call me after she read the book. She's about 74 years old. And I asked her, how is she doing? And she said, I'm just trying to live my life as a normal woman. A normal woman. And that was, for me, I kind of engaged with her more to kind of see what was going on with her thought process, so that I can guide her to the right resource. And her situation was, She was sexually assaulted living in the South. And she was told it she deserved it because she was pretty. And it's my when she said that to me, I was like, wow, like another one of those scenarios where I can't like I, I would have never thought my book had brought a situation out of like that out. And so I engaged with her, gave her the suicide hotline information. I gave her the Calm app, and I also gave her the Rain app, RAINN, to help her have meditation music, giving her yoga poses, things like that to kind of help her, kind of give her something to do to help move her towards healing. But acknowledging the truth for her was hard. And I think that is hard for a lot of people, just acknowledging that it happened and that facing that it happened. And then dealing with those trapped emotions and trapped memories is also a challenge. And so that's why I ask in the book, I ask them, make sure that this is something that you're ready to do because it's a journey, but it's so worth it. It is so worth it to come out on the other end knowing your strength, knowing your value, is huge, and it helps you see life so differently, um, and be able to breathe differently. So it's the acknowledge phase. I would say is a hard one, but the hardest one is for me was forgiveness. The forgiveness part. A lot of people think it's about forgiving others. No, it's about forgiving yourself, forgiving yourself for how you treated yourself all those years because you didn't know how to deal with it. You didn't know the resources. You didn't know, what would be the next step. But, now here you are. And like they say, if you know better, you do better. Now here's some information to kind of help you take to the next step and forgive yourself for how you treated yourself all those years. Because I know I mistreated myself for a lot of years. And to get to a point to forgive myself, to say, okay, I forgive me, I forgive my past, I forgive myself for the things that I've done, and being able to move past that. That was a huge effort, but it was one of the hardest things.
I can imagine. Now, the last part you talk about is rebirth. Now, I'm wondering, how do you catch those old ways when they start to creep up, and what's the routine you do to re-kill that part of you?
Yes. So
I think that was the right terminology. You said, killing it off, I think is what you
yeah,
said.
so killing those old ways is kind of like one of my one of my favorite gospel songs by Kirk Franklin is called Before I Die. And it talks about how we have a lot of old habits and a lot of things that we know we want to overcome. And when they start creeping back in, what do you need to do? For me, when I see my old habits come back, it goes back to self reflection, acknowledging that, okay, I'm getting back into a bad habit and I need to pull back from it. But the key to it though is really still taking time out, continue to take time out through your transition phase. You identify what are some of those habits, right? Those unhealthy habits. Then you identify and you create healthy habits like morning routines, morning rituals, bedtime routines. Those to me are so important because that's when you're actually able to reflect on your attitude, your actions for the day, and be able to see, okay, no, that was wrong with me, or I shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have responded to this person in that way. And having that self reflection, and again, using a tool like morning rituals and bedtime routines, it helps you reflect and kind of help get you back on track. So I love the morning ritual and bedtime routines. My family, they really they pick at me because they know, like my husband says, I'm the computer that shuts down at 9:30. It's like I started getting sleepy, like I can't kick it. And so before 9:30, I have to make sure I do everything I can because my body is trained now. And I go to bed at 9:30, and just like during my dissertation process, I'm still getting up at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. And I found that for me, it allows me that me time to really just reflect on what I need to do for the day, what's on my calendar, and then do all the other things that I like to do. So, for example, I get up in the morning now, I cook. I love cooking my family breakfast, sending them out the door, and be able to work out when they're after they're gone before I take a shower and get ready for work. So it's like this is the time for me and I feel accomplished. So that's a major tool that I still those are tools that I still keep. Whenever, like I said, whenever I'm doing if I see myself going back into those old habits, it helps me, those tools help me do reflection and help and self correct.
I think all too often people fail to do self reflections. It sounds like you do it daily, which is what I always tell people. That's what I advise people to do. I do that, and I have the similar. I wish that one thing I could get rid of is an alarm clock, and most of the time I have. I think that's the most. I think it causes so much neuroticism. People should wake up at the time in which it's natural for them to wake up, and your routine of going to bed can helps with that. So I set my alarm clock for the latest I want to get up, and rarely does it ever get to that point. The only time I ever change that alarm clock, and it doesn't matter to me, Monday through Sunday, I basically get up around the same time. I right this.
I was in Seattle last 2 weeks ago, and my body's still getting up at the same time, and it's like a struggle because I'm in Seattle at like 4, 3:30, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning up, and I'm like, oh.
Right. It's so true, and that's how I'm able to get all those things done because, well, I'm typically waking up right around 5:30 on my own. That's just my natural time I want to get up, and so that's what I'm doing. So I got one more question, and I'll let you open up to ask me the question because I've just been rocket firing on you. So one of the things I do with all of my first time guests, and hopefully you'll be a returning guest, what is next for you? What is a goal that I can help hold you accountable for?
My next goal is to do a TED Talk on childhood sexual abuse. That's my next goal. I want to do a TED Talk because I think that it's a topic that it's not just in the Black community, right? It's a global topic. I mean, I've had females from the Middle East talk about child marriages, because child marriage falls in there too. And it's a topic that a lot of people, such as yourself, right, who want to understand more about what others are experiencing. That's a trauma that, a lot of people like, wow, like, I didn't know you went through that, but to know you, I'm curious about the journey. And so people will get the book and I'm like, wow, now you're enlightened to a couple of things that you never really thought about, right? And so I think that the more awareness that we have on childhood sexual abuse, the more opportunities or the more influence we can to either prevent it or reduce the amount of it or increase the reporting of it, because a lot of it is not reported.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a lot of companies that have mandatory sexual assault awareness training, but what are they really doing about it, right? And so you have, what is it? April is National Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So that's an opportunity for people to get involved. Like we were talking the other day about male allyship. As a male, you have men that are leaders, men that are co-workers, men that are fathers whose children have been sexually assaulted, or brothers, and they can be allies for National Sexual Assault Awareness Month to increase awareness, to increase awareness about the issue as well as the resources that are out there. And so for me, the biggest thing that I'm looking to do is a TED Talk. I want to do a TED Talk before the year is out.
Well, that's not always in your control, but what steps have you taken in order to get there the next time we talk? So
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I because I have a friend who's done, and I didn't know she had did. Well, I'll say associate. I didn't know she had done a TED Talk. So when I mentioned it to her, she's like, "Oh, that's easy. I could help you do that." I was like, "Awesome, let's do it." So, yeah. So the TED Talk, is one, and then the other is my ultimate goal is to sit down with Oprah on Super Soul Sunday and have the conversation. I love Super Soul Sunday. Are you familiar with Super Soul
I
Sunday?
am. I am. Mhm.
Oh, see, that's what I'm talking about. So yes,
Mm.
so even if it's just to meet Oprah, I'm just saying that's a goal of mine.
Yeah, she's an interesting lady. I mean, I can't say it's like with most things. I can't say that I agree with everything she is, but I think that's what makes it interesting. You
Yes,
know, I don't want to be around people that just agree with me 100% of the time. I think it would be boring.
it is.
You know,
It,
one of my good friends that I went to GW with, probably when we did that, both on the computer forensics for masters of computer forensics, we were probably much further away from each other on the political spectrum, and now we're probably both like she's come more a little bit more to the right, and I've gone more to the left, so more centrist. And I think as mature people over time, they become their beliefs all start to get more and more towards the center, because you've had to learn. Well, hey, not everything is black or white. It's not all
yes,
binary. So
yes,
it's
yes,
shades of gray.
yeah.
So it's that's what I found, because it really just depends on the scenario. But I would never want people to just agree with me. That's just it just wouldn't be fun. How can I grow? You can't drink a good wine without that grape struggling.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So, Cynthia, what can I answer for you? I've been peppering you with all these questions. You know,
Sure. So I'll ask, when you read the book, give me some of the things that you didn't know, or something that made you say,
um, as in just in
in general.
general.
Yeah.
Well, I would say one of those. It didn't surprise me, but I didn't know specifically the statistics on how sexual abuse tends to happen. Where it's most, it's. I think the stat was, I don't have it in front of me. It was like 95% is because they actually know the person,
Mm-hmm.
and only 5% of it or something like that. It was a very small percentage. I can just remember the pie chart. It was one really small little sliver and a really big sliver. So that it doesn't surprise me, but I was or shocked to think it was that much. Um, and yeah, that would have probably been the most shocking thing to me, other than like reading all these things about you, because that shows. I looked at the first part of it. That people think that courage can only be shown one way, and I think the biggest way that we can all show courage is by being vulnerable and putting it out there. And so you went, in a way, to the extreme. You just didn't go vulnerable to your loved ones. You went vulnerable to the world forever.
And for me, it was me putting myself out there for others, because I don't want women or young girls to feel that they're alone in this world, because I felt that I was alone. I don't want women to feel that they're alone in this, because I felt that I was alone. And so I wanted to be there. And that's the whole, the intent of the book is to give them companionship, to help them understand you're not alone in this. You're not alone in your journey. And even when, like, what my grandmother's sister, my grandmother's younger sister, when I released the book, she called me and she said, "Oh my God, I didn't know this happened to you. It happened to me too. I thought I was the only one." And I was like, wow, and for her to say that to me, it was it was like just amazing to have someone so close to home say, you know, that this helped them feel like they're not alone in this world and in this journey, in this effort. And so for me, it's just being able to be that person for them was well more worth, more valuable to me than, the evilness, the hatred that's going to come from me once this book starts going a little bit further. Because I've had people call and say, oh, this book didn't work for me. I was like, well, when did you get the book? Oh, I got it last week. And you tried the book? It was like, yeah, and it didn't work for me. And I said, and you read the book? Yes. And I automatically knew that they had other issues.
Well,
So,
and there's no magic pill in anything, right? You've laid out a framework that they could apply, but it doesn't happen overnight. It's the same thing I say to people that are now obese. Well, you didn't get to be obese overnight. You're not going to get to be back at whatever weight you want to be overnight. If you've been suffering trauma for 30 years, you're not going to get rid of that in a week. Now, I hope it won't take you 30 years to get rid of all of it, but it might. You're, yeah.
it takes time. And that's what I say in the book. And that's how I know she didn't really read the book, because for example, one of the prime examples I give is that, they say it takes at least 21 days to create a new habit. You have only had the book for a week. So, it is what it is. And I know that there is some, like I said, negativity that'll come from the book, but I'm willing to take that on, because as long as I can help at least one person, I feel like I've done what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, and it's not just that, but what is it? It's 10,000 hours to develop a skill? Is that what it is? Is that the.
I don't know.
I think it's.
I don't know. I
Let's see.
think I may have read that in a book about creating a quarterback. They talk about the amount of the amount of hours it takes to become a professional or something.
Yeah, so it's a good thing I got this internet thing right here. 10,000 hours of intensive practice to achieve mastery of a complex skill,
There
right?
you go.
So 21 days to get that habit, but you're not going to master that even in 21 days. 10,000 hours is a lot of hours. And it came out of Malcolm Gladwell's book,
Yeah,
Outliers.
but we are in the age of instant gratification for a lot of people. They want it now. And so they think that you can take a magic pill to lose weight. They think that you can read a book and do a couple of things and you're healed. And it's not. That's not how it works. And it's like you said, it took you years to form this. It's going to take you years to break it in some instances. And even for me, even after the childhood sexual abuse trauma that I healed from, I still had other issues that I had to deal with, that were not related to the childhood sexual abuse, that I still had to deal with. You know, for example, being told that women are stupid, women aren't smart, stuff like that. And you when you hear that a lot, that also like puts a lot of negativity in your brain. So you continue to, either you shrink from it or you rise above it. And so, but after so long, it's just that when you get told that so much, it also creates, some negative thinking in your head, and it takes a lot to break. And I know for me to get to a positive mindset, it took a lot of me breaking a lot of bad, ugly thought processes. And that's like you said, what do you do to recover? Well, like I said, my bedtime routines, like morning rituals, as well as listening to positive music. I mean, there are some songs that just really get me going. And one of my favorite songs, people look at me like I'm crazy when I say this, but two of my three movies that make me cry: Moana, Frozen, and Sing. They have some awesome songs in those movies.
Which was the last one?
Sing.
I don't think I've seen that one now.
Yes, that it has Tori Kelly and some more in it. And their performance at the end of the movie, it just makes me get up and just want to dance. And so when you hear positive songs like that, it just, it helps you kind of reshift your thinking as well. So those are some other tools.
Yeah, my daughter loves both of those first two, and so whenever I go to pick her up, I'm always playing "You're Welcome."
I keep at the edge of the world.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So I play "You're Welcome," but I change it out from saying Maui to to my own name. So
So cute. But I
hey,
will say, being that's one of the things, like even with my husband, I make sure that he understands the importance of being a very supportive dad, to a young girl, because this world will, try to influence her in so many different ways. And so to, like you said, playing those songs, being there for her, those are huge moments. She don't know it now, but those are things that will influence her thought processes as well.
and I make it a I overemphasize these things with her because I don't get to have her all the time. I get her, a weekend a month, and then basically all summer, just because I'm in Indiana, she's in Maryland. But we talk quite a bit on Skype, and I always talk to her and say different things about how smart she is, how brave. We talk about her education. Rarely do I say things like, "Oh, you're pretty." Not that she's not, but I don't want her self-worth to
To
be
begin with.
based on what she
Yeah.
sees in the mirror, but by her actions. So I feel really good when someone asks, "Well, what do you want to be when you grow up?" She's like, "I want to be an inventor."
There you go.
I'm not sure she knows exactly what that means just yet. She's 8, but
And
she's like,
that's
"Hey, I'm
okay.
inventing things." And
Yes.
one of the things that I tell people as well is imagine yourself at 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And even if and you might not be able to, but we've all seen a 3 year old. And to every 3 year old, you're the strongest, you're the fastest, you're the smartest. You look at the world with endless possibilities. Now, if you could take that same attitude in life as it was as a 3 year old and apply it today, what's impossible? Nothing. Everything is possible.
Mm-hmm.
So remember take that 3 year old spirit in yourself and attack the world with that same spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yep, yep, yep. I
Everyone's your best friend at 3 years old.
Yes, they are. And you want your child, your daughter, specifically with your daughter, to be that fierce little person. And have them feel that they can try and do everything, as they say in Zootopia.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and I love being able to nurture that in my daughter. That's something that I take pride in doing. And so, when you, like you said, being there for her, you're doing all the right things to keep that relationship with her, and help build her self-esteem. So, kudos on you being, that dad, because girls do need that.
I was very proud of her. So one of the things I basically insist is martial arts. I still do martial arts today, and so she did her first tournament not too long ago, and so she's the youngest, and the uh, lowest belt in that particular bracket. And so she's doing the sparring, forms, all this stuff. And then so she did the sparring and she wound up finishing second. She was really upset. And I'm like, you shouldn't be upset. You went up, you're 7 years old and you went up against a 12-year-old. He was much, much bigger than you. And you still almost won. You were very close. You lost by 1 point and you blocked things. For her highest kick is only going to this guy's rib cage, so it's like good do it. But she didn't back down, and she took one square to the face and shook it off and got right back up. And I'm like, that's all you can do. Life's gonna
Yep,
knock you down. Just get back up.
exactly. Life's gonna do the same thing. Life's gonna do the same thing. I had one of my contractors came to me, and she had expressed to me her issue because her daughter had been, and it's amazing how it wasn't even book. It was just my story. Like you said, me putting myself out there to be vulnerable allowed others to actually be vulnerable to me. And I had one of my contractors to come to me and tell me that, it was the weekend after, it was after the weekend when she came back, but she said her daughter had been date raped on a campus in Virginia. And I was talking to her because she was like, her nerves were kind of like shot. And we were just talking, even though it had already happened and everything that had been, she had been there for her daughter, she still was, traumatized with dealing with it. And, you never know what life is going to throw at you. No one would have ever considered that, hey, my daughter went off to school and someone slipped something in her drink. No one would ever have thought that, that's not I'm not going to say never thought that. That's not something that comes to your mind, right? And so when you look at stuff happen like that, that's a kick in the face. That's a gut punch, right? And like you said, your daughter's taking these kicks and things like that. And life is just like that. You're going to get these kicks. You're going to get these gut punches. You're going to get these knockdowns. But as long as she has her tools, she has her support system, she'll be able to bounce back. And having that relationship with you will help her with that, with any challenge that she gets in life.
That's what I hope. Well, Cynthia, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on. I do hope you will come back on in the future and talk some leadership stuff or whatever else you might have in mind. But I greatly appreciate it. And if there's anything that I can do for you in the future, please don't hesitate to ask.
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate that.
All right. Well, thank you again so much. And everyone out there, thanks for tuning in. Cynthia, how can people reach you? To get social media?
Yeah, my email address is drcys@drcys.com. My website is www.drcys.com. And I'm on IG as drcys2018. So if you need to reach out to me, please feel free to do so.
Awesome. And I'll make sure I put all that in the show notes as well so they can get in touch with you. Again, it was a pleasure, Cynthia. Thank you so much. And everyone out there, take care.